to Comic Talkers, where comics is always the top of our discussion. I'm Mary,
And I'm Brandon.
and welcome back to another week of our 52 book club. We are starting today with week 18. Of course, by this point, we are about a third into the year, so you should probably go back and check out some things if you have not caught up with us. Um, but we are moving on to week 18 of the 52 event, and we are starting off in a new location. Very exciting. It's one of my favorite locations in the entire DCU. And this is, of course, the House of Mystery.
Yes.
Um, I love this place. I love that it's never in an actual location. It moves
Yes.
around. Like it's wonderful. I adore the House of Mystery. Um, and we are really sort of seeing a group of people that includes Ralph Dibny in some photos, but there are people entering the house that do not include Ralph, but they are seeming to be the people that are in this photograph. And we see who can only be known as Detective Chimp, the unmistakable. Um, then we're seeing two other people, and then we see someone sitting in a chair, someone named Tim. And that's really all we can give you on this Tim. He has 10 total appearances. Um, we know he was a private investigator from St. Louis, Missouri. We know that at one point he teamed up with Wonder Woman. That's where he first appeared, is in Wonder Woman 180 from 1969. And then he then returned home, opened up a private PI office, and was not seen again, really, until the 52. Um, Wonderful times we're having here. And well, it's interesting because they sort of tap his shoulder and he turns into a puddle.
Yeah.
And in that puddle, we see Dr. Fate's helmet. Detective Chimp pulls down his little Sherlock Holmes hat and says, "Is anyone else's nose twitching?" And then we move on to the great nation of Kahndaq. So I'm going to turn over to Brandon.
So as we left off in Kahndaq last time, Renee Montoya saves the day by shooting a kid that had a bomb strapped to her chest and was going to ignite the bomb during Black Adam's and Isis's wedding. So instead of being fugitives like they were before all this, they're actually rewarded. Black Adam states the following. I'm going to state it right here. On her wedding day, a vile and sinister attempt to kill hundreds by means of a suicide bomb was averted by your heroic action in the defense of Kahndaq and her people. Thus, it is our pleasure to present you and your partner with the Order of the Crescent, the highest honor Kahndaq bestows upon those not born on of her soil. Wear it with pride, Charles Victor Saz, in the knowledge that you and Renee Montoya are known to all as friends of Kahndaq and its rulers. Of course, Vic's there, but Renee's not. And let's put it this way, Adam's not taking this very well. That you're here being awarded a prize or an award this high in prestige in Kahndaq and you're not present. Victor tries to, well, people heal or people deal with things differently. Because Adam's looking at her like a hero. We're going to find out Renee does not look at herself as a hero. Adam tries to remind Vic that she didn't have a choice at this point. It was either that or the bomb was going to ignite. And Vic kind of mentions, yeah, well, let's just say she doesn't see it like that. Well, let's put it this way. Adam finds her with a Kahndaqi citizen, a woman, having sex in a room. And Adam's pissed. You're here instead of being awarded this high prestigious honor. What I love too is you see in that background when Adam barges into the wall, you see Isis carrying Vic. That was one of my favorite panels right there, just seeing them. And what I love too is you see still that smart aleckness from Renee when Adam goes, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And Renee goes, "You don't really want me to answer that, do you?"
Also, something that I noticed in this that I thought was a really excellent detail is when Charlie says she's coping in her usual way. We know that in the past, Renee has turned to alcohol,
Yes.
and all of her speech bubbles are squiggly.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
lines aren't clean. They suggest that she's also been drinking on top of this without ever actually showing us any alcohol. It's a really excellent artistic move.
Of course, Adam gets pissed with this, with her little smart remark that you not realize you're insulting me. You have any idea who you're speaking to? And Renee just tells him to shut up and looks at Vic and goes, "Man, what is it with you, Charlie? Every time I'm getting some, you have to crash the party. And you got a crush on me or what?" She points at Adam. And he states clearly, and what I love here is he states, "There was a time when I would have cheerfully killed you for speaking to me as you have." And Renee pretty much states, "Don't let me stop you." Of course, Adam continues going on and says, "You were supposed to receive the Order of the Crescent today, a great honor, but instead of attending the ceremony at the palace, I find you here, drunkenly taking pleasure with one of my citizens." And he asks again, "Do you mean to insult me on my new bride, or is there some other explanation?" And Renee kind of snaps on him and says, "Get that thing out of my face." Slaps the award away from him. Adam doesn't take this lightly and chokes her. Now, you get to see how this has really damaged Renee. And Adam goes, he continues on, "I am a changed man, but not that changed." And of course, Isis is yelling at him to stop. But Renee says, "That's it. That's right. Just do it." And you see tears rolling down her eyes. I want to ask you, Mary, because this is such a powerful scene to see how would you explain this to fans how when you read this? What was your take on Renee's feelings for this right now?
It's, of course, coming from a social historical perspective. This is something we see a lot with soldiers returning from war, especially in more modern wars, beginning with Vietnam and into more recent wars where children are being used by adults in conflict because the assumption is that a child will not be, it will be harder for someone to shoot a child than an adult. Um, and so this reaction is extremely common. I am just extremely glad that DC actually decided to show the reaction.
Yes.
Um, Too often, a lot of times, trauma like this is discounted in comic book stories. DC especially has a really bad history of doing this.
Right.
Um, and of course, comics after this will not handle things like this as well. But the way that the 52 does it is excellent. I also really enjoy the fact that they're letting Renee show these emotions. That's another huge issue, is that a lot of, especially in this period of comics, women weren't really allowed to show things like this that could be considered a weakness because it was part of the, like, this idea that like feminism meant that they weren't allowed to have feelings. Um,
That's what I said. I agree with you 100% there. I think when it comes to um Renee, the fact being that she just killed a child. Yes, granted, it's like Vic tells her during that whole week at 16 issue, you did the right thing. You had no choice. You have to make decisions like this. You can see it affects Renee every step of the way. And I agree with you. I'm glad it was Renee doing this than anybody else. Because again, for somebody like her coming as a cop, coming as this, and now coming into a role that she's about to step up in later on, um, she's gonna have to learn a lot of hard truths. And it is something too. I love it that it's with Adam. And the fact being that Adam is still learning too that he can't be doing things like this either from ISIS, because we do see ISIS stop him and say, this isn't solving anything. You do, her grief and your anger are both misplaced. Now, after this, Vic kind of agrees with ISIS and says, we have a common goal right now, Intergang. Intergang's affecting all of us. It's affected Gotham, it's affected Kahndaq. What are we going to do about this now? We need to realize this. And Renee kind of continues on and says, I killed a kid, Charlie, and you're going to be eating your liver, what's left of it, over that for years to come. But none of us are talking about why that girl was there in the first place. And handing out medals, lovely as they might be, or going on a week-long benders with the prettiest Lassen or Sharuda doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't even address it. The problem is Intergang. On top of everything else, along with their monster men and their weapons, why are they using kids? And even ISIS states, that's a good question. It must be stopped. And Adam goes, and let's stop it.
There's something that I really enjoy about this particular scene is the way that it positions Charlie and Isis in the same role for their respective partners.
I agree with that. I saw that too. I noticed that.
I really love that because they are both trying to be the voice of reason that pulls their partner away from self-destruction that leads to the destruction of others.
Yes. I noticed that too. That's why I love that both that Vic and ISIS are the two mediators for these guys.
And from the beginning of this scene, when she's carrying him in, they're essentially positioned as a unit.
Right. I agree. Now,
It's great.
now we turn to Mary again because we get to finally see a character we have not seen in weeks.
So happy he's back. We are of course we're back in France. We haven't been in France really since like the very beginning of the story. But we are back in France with my main man Ralph Dibny. I'm so glad he's back, but we're also here with Detective Chimp. Um, guess which one's my favorite? And we
Come on, there's got to be some love for Detective Chimp. In those comments, let us know if you like Detective Chimp. Come on.
and we see Detective Chimp looking at Ralph and going, there's no evidence as to what exactly caused the transformation. That's what makes this one a Ralph Dibny special. Locked through mystery with a severe touch of the weird, which is it is a classic Ralph Dibny thing. We essentially see Ralph and Detective Chimp sort of talking about whether or not Ralph is going to take on this case with the Croatoans, a group that he is part of. Now, the Croatoans, we saw some of them earlier. We did see that picture of them. And they're a group of detectives that met regularly at the House of Mystery. Um, consisted of Detective Chimp, Terri 13, Edogawa Sangaku, Tim Trench, and Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man. This group unlocked the mysteries of Stonehenge, Easter Island, Casper Hauser, and the television series Lost. And after the death of his wife, Ralph sort of stopped attending the meetings. And then he's getting brought back into the group in this conversation, essentially. And Detective Chimp says, no offense to my other gang, but they're mystics, not detectives. Ralph says that may be so, but I think we're going to need them. And he tells Detective Chimp to call in the Shadow Pact. So Ralph has officially taken on the case, but he's going to need a little extra help.
Right.
Which brings us to Cincinnati, Ohio, home of Skyline Chili.
Which back in week 15, we saw, I guess, somewhat you can call her heroic sacrifice, but in some ways, to some people, it was kind of a stupid sacrifice. Because this guy was all out for fame and tried to repair his reputation, and pretty much is nuked in some ways. We're talking about Booster Gold. Now, we see him go to Cincinnati, Ohio. Now,
Soda cola mourns your passing.
Yeah. So we put it this way. Now, this is the funeral of Booster, but we find out Clark is one of the ones that helped assemble this. Put this whole funeral together, and we find out it took 3 weeks to arrange. Now, Skeets is there with him and mentions this. He says, "Believe me, Mr. Kent, I'm equally overwhelmed or underwhelmed, but that's how long it took to find a host city free of," and he says, "shall we say, anti-booster sentiment?" And Clark reminds Skeets, Booster has never even been in Cincinnati. Now, here's the thing that we find out about these guys who are carrying the casket. They didn't even know who Booster was, or they even really work with Booster. We find out that this gig was put up on something called Hero List. And we see a whole bunch of B-list, not even B-list, like C or D-list characters that you probably had never even heard of. And I don't even know who all these characters are. That's just how obscured it is. Now, all of them are just doing it. Oh, they were just doing it for the coverage. They were doing it for this. It was all for the wrong reasons that these guys were doing.
Nobody is there for Booster.
Yeah. And let's put it this way. All the heroes take off following the hearse that's carrying Booster's body. Now, Skeet starts to act funny here. Now, Clark even asks, do you want me to, drive you down to the funeral or to the burial site, everything? And Skeets goes, "I'll fly on my own, Mr. Kemp. I see someone I wish to speak of." Now, we see this random guy walking behind Clark and Skeets. And Skeets goes right up to him. And he says, "Excuse me, sir, but you seem vaguely familiar. I ask your name and what brings you to the service?" And the guy kind of starts freaking out. And he goes, "Who, me? I'm Daniel Carter. I'm here because, I don't know, just had a lunch hour, felt like I ought to be here for some reason. Should I know you or something?" And we see Skeets analyzing him. And it comes up as Daniel John Carter. And it also states DNA analysis, chance of ancestral link to Booster with a 93.2% chance. The guy thinks he's on TV. It does come up as a 100% match later on, saying this is the ancestor of Booster Gold. Now, Skeets kind of flies off and answers his question flying off, and he goes about if he's on TV or not. And he goes, "Not yet, but contact me tonight on the number I've beamed to your cell phone, Daniel Carter. We need to talk about your future." Now, we turn back to Ralph Dibny.
Woo! So we are in front of the Great Pyramids at Giza. And they're essentially talking about how they were watching, Dr. Fate die. Um, we're seeing the group Shadow Pact talking about what they watched when Dr. Fate passed. But we were introduced to them, of course, Ragman, Nightmaster, Blue Devil, Nightshade, and Enchantress. They're all sort of gathered around Dr. Fate's helmet in front of the pyramid. And Detective Chimp was looking at Ralph and said, "You all right with all this? It's not what I consider a comfort zone for you," as they're talking about all the different magic that they're going to try to use the helmet as a focal point for. Ralph says, "Desperate times, old friend." And no one was going, "What do you mean desperate? You didn't say anything about desperate, Ralph." And then the helmet speaks. Helmet says, "Welcome to the 10th age. Nothing is as it was before. The forces of magic in this new era obey new laws, new axioms. For far too long, those who have dabbled in the eternal struggle between order and chaos have trivialized the single most fundamental rule of reality. Nothing comes without a price." Then we learn a little bit more about Timothy Trench, in that he was the first in the new era to find the helmet, but he was too impatient in the discovery. Basically, he didn't do all of the hullabaloo you have to do before you put on Fate's helmet for it to attune to you. Um, Similar process if you've seen the new D&D movie. Similar process for that helmet.
Yeah.
Um, and the helmet is talking, says, and thus the opportunity falls to you, Ralph Dibny. I can give you the answers you seek. I can guide you through a realm where the barriers of time and space may be breached and your heart's desires can be yours for the asking. I'm obliged, however, to warn you that the trials this journey requires will be beyond your imagining. Are you prepared to make every sacrifice I ask of you? And within the helmet's eyes, we see Sue Dibny. And Ralph says, I am. Detective Chimp says, what are you doing? Ralph says, you heard what it said, and I'm ready. The helmet says, and our pilgrimage begins. Ralph says, pilgrimage, I like that. Everyone else is freaking out a little bit. And we find out, as Enchantress says in the last panel, does he think that the helmet was talking to
It's all of them with a puzzled face.
him? Which, oh, Ralph, we have once again found ourselves in this situation.
Oh, that does end our main issue, but we do have an origin story. And of course, what better character to do it this week with the question? Of course, this part is written by Mark Waid. Of course, never go wrong with Mark Waid to doing these origins because it's fun, it's entertaining, and he gets straight to the point. And I state the following, of course, all work and what was it? All this text goes towards DC Comics. All Charles Victor Sass ever wanted was answers. Who were his parents? Why did they orphan him? How would he survive a brutal childhood? And what kind of man would he become? As Vic Sage, he pursued a career as an investigative reporter in the crime-ridden, festering town known as Hub City. It was a fairly easy job. Corruption in Hub City wasn't difficult to find. Though it hated like hell to be uncovered. To do that job and to live to tell about it would require some measure of anonymity. Enter Aristotle Roeder, one of Sage's former college professors. Roeder's drawing from the extract of the Gingold plant and from the notes of Gotham criminal Bart Megan had created the substance pseudoderm. As an artificial skin, pseudoderm was designed for dressing wounds. When exposed to a certain gas, however, it masked Sage's appearance while allowing him to see and breathe normally. As reporter Vic Sage, he pursued the facts. As the question, he pursues the truth. Of course,
For those of you who remember our Ralph Dibny origin story, that's the same Gingold plant. For the record.
Now, his powers and weapons, of course, he's trained by Richard Dragon, one of the world's most foremost martial artists, and he's pretty much what's trained the question to be a great hand-to-hand combatant. He's also keenly observant and exceptionally intuitive as a detective. Essential storylines, of course, there's Mysterious Suspense #1, The Question first series, which is 1 through 36, and Batman Huntress Cry for Blood. I love The Question. I have no doubt about it. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. But yeah, this does end this week's issue. As always, we want to thank you for watching this video. If you like this, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go check out weeks 1 through 17 before you hit to this video. What was it? And as always, we have that playlist so you guys can go review that. You can watch anything that like History Through Comics 52. We got some new great stuff coming out soon. So we look forward to hearing from you guys and getting your guys' reactions to this. Of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Comment Talkers to get all the latest updates. Comment below how you're liking 52. What did you like about issue 18? Is Ralph going really crazy or the helmet really talking to him? Please let us know that. You can also listen to other comic book and anime content on our normal podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify for podcasters, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast. List can go on and on. Please go follow us. Please subscribe. Hit those like buttons. We appreciate that feedback. As always, my name is Brandon.
And I'm Mary.
And may comics always be the top of your discussion.